You know, in the book of Daniel, the thing that made Daniel and his friends so great was their staunch commitment to staying connected to God, regardless of what the cost was going to be. And because of that, they were connected to the source, the ultimate source of wisdom. And it was that wisdom and that source of wisdom that gave them the ability to be successful in the midst of a horribly pagan land like the Babylonian Empire. You know, wisdom comes from all sorts of shapes and sizes and all different types of areas in our world. And yet all that is called wisdom is not really wisdom. You know, we live in a world where there's a lot of confusion as to what wisdom really is and where wisdom really comes from. And so let's talk for a minute about worldview. You see, every single person you know, including you and I, have a worldview, whether we know it or not. Now, put simply, a worldview is the way that a person views their life, how they think life ought to be lived, and how they live their lives based on that belief, hopefully. Now, a lot of times those two don't coincide very well. People believe life should be lived one way, but they don't necessarily live it the way that they say it should be lived. But that's the basic idea there. And so the issues of morality, of right and wrong, who I should be, what I should care about, how I view things that are going on in the world around me, those are my worldview, right? Now, if you think of the concept of wisdom from that perspective, you begin to get the sense that wisdom is kind of fluid when you look at it that way. And the reason being is that it can be affected by so many different sources from the outside. For example, think about how much we are bombarded with information today. You have TV, you have movies, you have music, you have art, you have search engines, you have blogs, you got YouTube, you got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, you got family, friends, professors, teachers, all of the list goes on and on. There are so many sources of information in our world. And every single one of those sources has its own belief, its own worldview, right? And those are usually based on, they start with a basic assumption and a basic premise, and that's theirs, and that's their prerogative with that. But to have real wisdom, to see things clearly and accurately, you have to be connected to the source. You have to start with the source, the ultimate source of wisdom. Let me illustrate it for you like this. If you probably noticed, I'm sitting in an unfinished room right here. This is actually an unfinished bathroom in our addition here, and you're probably wondering why at this point. As I've told you before, we've added on a couple of rooms and a bathroom, for our daughters and stuff under our home. And in the process, I was in Hayden's room one day. It's all finished and all that, and I just went in to plug in a sound machine, and I plugged it into an outlet that's on this wall right here, and it didn't have any power. And I was like, well, that's weird. I mean, so I checked the other outlets in the room. Everything else worked fine. Lights are on and off. Everything was fine, but this one outlet just wouldn't give me power. And I was like, wow, that's really strange. And so what I did was I went out and went through the hallway and went to the other room, which is right here, which is the exact mirror of this bedroom. And so it has an outlet on this wall over here also. And so I plugged it into that outlet. No power. Checked all the other outlets in the room. Perfect. There's power to all those outlets and the lights come on and all that. And I'm like, man, what is going on? Why don't these outlets have power? And I'm starting to freak out a little bit because I'm like, man, am I going to have to start poking holes in the walls and trying to find, did something loose somewhere? Did I not connect something? What is happening here? And through the process, I eventually figured out what the issue was. But what I want to do is I want to actually take you to the issue. So let's go. Okay, so the problem was this right here. See, I hadn't connected the circuit yet. See, in the process of me doing the electric for the addition and all that, partway through I decided that I wanted the bathroom to be on its own circuit. And part of that also meant that those two outlets were going to be on the bathroom circuit, and I hadn't connected the circuit for that yet, and so therefore there's no power going to that. Guys, without being connected to the source of power, I wasn't going to be able to use those outlets. Guys, the same thing's going to be true when it comes to God. We got to be able to have His wisdom. We have to be connected to the source of wisdom in order to have that power. So now the question is, well, what about the application of that? What does that look like? Well, to help illustrate that, I want to take you to one of the greater loves of my life. You know, as I said, I'm about to introduce you to one of the greater loves in my life. My coffee pot. You know, there's not a whole lot better than waking up in the morning with that fresh, hot cup of coffee. Sorry you had to see that. Anyways, you're probably familiar with how a coffee pot works, and the key to this coffee pot is this thing right here, the filter. Put the grounds in there, pop it in there, and you get that awesome coffee here in just a minute. But here's the deal. Again, with this being the key, what it does is it keeps all those grounds out of your coffee. Then you end up with nothing but that really great morning juice. Well, guys, the same thing is going to be true in life. You see, we've got to be able to go to the source for wisdom. We have to go to God's truth. God is that filter. You see, we take whatever situation it is that we're facing, whatever conversation we have to have, whatever social issue is happening, and we have to form an opinion on that, and we go to the source. We go to God, and we filter it through His truth and His wisdom, and by doing that, that can help us to be successful. So guys, we've got to learn to be able to do that for each other and for those around us, right? We've got to be able to say, okay, I'm going to sift this through God's filter and be able to go, what does God think about that? And then we can decide, and then we can move on. That's the key to this, though. Make sure we go to the source, make sure we filter it through God's truth, and by doing that, it can help us to be great. So let's work on doing that together this week. Would you like a cup of coffee? Guess not.